little earlier, I was talking about how the Trump administration has been doing some great work on dismantling DEI and trying to restore meritocracy. And then you see other groups that are fighting the Trump administration kind of tooth and nail, or maybe hammer and claw. I don't know how you want to put it. But joining me this morning is Will Hild, and Will Hild, once again, is the executive director of Consumers Research. Hello, Will. Welcome back to the show. Good to have you on.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Great to be with you again.
Tell us about Consumers Research first off, if you could. Tell us about the whole group and what's your website, et cetera.
Absolutely. Well, we're the nation's oldest consumer protection organization, founded in 1929, have a nearly 100-year pedigree of educating consumers on issues important to them and amplifying their voice in the marketplace. But the last 4 or 5 years, we've been really focused on pushing back against woke capitalism and the myriad ways that not only offensive politically to a lot of people, but it's also undermining the quality of the goods and services that everyone from all walks of life and all political perspectives, rely on to have the standard of living that we have in this country. And so we've been highlighting companies that distract from their misdeeds in their market or the mistreatment of their customers by going woke, cozying up to woke activists instead of focusing on doing their jobs. And so this, as you noted, we've been sort of focusing on the Chamber of Commerce here in the last week and the myriad ways that they've been engaging in that. You asked for my website. People can learn more at consumersresearch.org. This interview.
And by the way, I signed up for those woke alerts, and you text message me every now and then. And I got a text message the other day about the United States Chamber of Commerce. Now, I've been open about not being fans of Chamber of Commerce's because I don't really look at the Chamber of Commerce as being a conservative, business-focused group any longer. I kind of see it as a snake pit of activism, and I'm wondering if this is the latest of where you're going with this new woke alert. What do you think?
That's exactly right. And we started digging into the chambers. A whistleblower alerted me to some videos of a conference that they did regarding getting rid of litigation, consumer litigation, and ways that they could combat it, called dismantling the machine. So they paint the ability of consumers to sue them when then they're hurt by their product as some sort of nefarious project. But in any case, I'm going through the videos, and I was absolutely startled at some of the things that they were pushing. And in fact, I want to highlight one in particular. They had someone from the board of a group called Leadership Council on Legal Diversity come and speak on the importance of effectively race and sex-based quotas in all of their companies, and more importantly, all of the law firms that they were hiring. And I've come on this program before, I think, to talk about things like the Net Zero Asset Management Group or the Net Zero Bankers Alliance. These were effectively cartels of banks and asset managers who were coordinating their activities to push a political agenda to override the will of the populace, not having to go to the ballot box. Mm-hmm. Luckily, most of them have been dismantled by actions of state AGs and the federal government. But the leadership, the LCLD, this Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, is effectively a cartel for pushing DEI into big law. And the way it operates is that it's a group of corporations who say that they will only give outside legal work, and that's how most corporations handle their litigation. They don't do it in-house. They have in-house lawyers who manage the outside attorneys and decide which firm is going to take the case. And in this case, by signing on to this group, you agree to push a bunch of diversity quotas and incentives onto the firms you're hiring, or you won't hire them. So it's effectively a cartel. It's saying we're going to use our market power to push this race and sex-based quota agenda. It's effectively a cartel for discrimination. Okay. So I was absolutely shocked and appalled to see the Chamber of Commerce have someone pushing this nonsense at their own conference, and that's really what led us down this road.
Now, has the Chamber of Commerce fully signed on to this, or was this an outlier within the Chamber of Commerce structure that decided that, hey, we got to go wokey-brokey, and we'll only hire woke law firms, that kind of thing, filled with DEI hires, that sort of thing?
That's a great question. No, this wasn't a one-off. As we went digging into a lot of their materials, what we found is a pattern of engaging in express racial discrimination. For example, they have a number of policies, and they had a grant program that was exclusively for black-owned businesses. They were discriminating on where they gave out these grants based on the race of the person who owned or ran the business. They've encouraged their own companies who are members to engage in racial discrimination, to have metrics and incentives around hitting certain race and sex-based quotas for hiring and promotion. So it's actually a pattern of behavior. But I just couldn't. I was so shocked that they would have someone from this incredibly evil organization, Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, come and speak. It was really the capstone to a pattern, it would appear, of encouraging race discrimination in employment, which is crazy because we have federal laws and state laws against that. After the 1965 Civil Rights Act, that was supposed to ban all of that activity. And now they are engaging in it and virtue signaling about it, bragging about it. So we think they need to be called out for this, because I still think the average person probably sees the Chamber of Commerce as sort of a generally conservative or free market pro-business group. And that could just be no farther from the truth.
I don't think the chambers have been. I don't think the chambers have been like that for 30, maybe 40 years. I think it's been going on that long. Will, do you have an opinion on that or a take on it?
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't this bad until the last about 10 years, but absolutely, they started going this direction in the early 2000s. And what they realized is that the conservative movement generally was free market and pro-business to begin with. So they had nothing to gain by caring what conservatives thought about them. They just sort of took their support as a given. And increasingly, they virtue signaled to the left that, hey, we'll make a bargain with you so that when you're in power, you don't beat on us too much. And that grew and grew and grew to really they're indistinguishable from an arm of the Democratic Party. There's not a lot of daylight between the Chamber of Commerce and the Center for American Progress or the Brookings Institution, which are the two left-wing think tanks here in D.C., or two big ones. And so I just think people need to update their sort of perception of this organization. I think when you see a politician talk about working with the chamber, I think you need to count that as a mark against them, not for them, if you care about the free market or you care just about people not being racially or sexually discriminated in the workplace. Chamber of Commerce is now avowedly in support of race and sex-based discrimination.
Are there any calls from within the chamber structure itself to reform and get back to being essentially politically neutral, more of a politically neutral stance?
That's a great question. I've had people reach out to me whose companies that they work out are members, and they just express a ton of frustration with the organization. I'm not an insider there, but my understanding is that they have a very arcane and insulated governance structure that would make it very difficult for the current leadership to truly be overturned. I think probably what's more likely to happen is, as being a member of the Chamber of Commerce becomes a marker of alignment with the left, the companies that don't feel that way will peel off, and the chamber will just eventually collapse. I know that sounds incredible because they're a very powerful organization still, but I think they are waning in power and influence, and increasingly they find themselves isolated within D.C. The left, for all of their virtue signaling, still just doesn't like them. And they've betrayed the right. So I don't see a lot of room for them to have a lot of influence in the future. But I do think it's important that people understand and consumers understand that when there is a business that they're frequenting that's a member of the Chamber of Commerce, they are supporting race and sex-based discrimination.
I wonder if the reason why the United States Chamber of Commerce went with this, what was the legal racket that you were talking about earlier, the name of that? What was that?
The Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. Okay.
We'll just call it the leadership racket, okay? Because we know that's what this is. I wonder if this is in reaction to another story that I was talking about this morning that has to do with the Department of Justice eliminated the disparate impact liability from Title VI regulations. That's in other words, restoring the Civil Rights Act to its original 1964 meaning, in which you didn't have to, you would have to prove overt discrimination, that somebody had a rule or a test or something like that intended to discriminate against this particular group, rather than the fact that some groups ended up not winning and others won. That disparate impact rule, that story. I don't know if you heard that or not.
I sure did, and that's a very astute observation. The disparate impact regime that, unfortunately, the DOJ decided to support, I think it was actually under H.W. Bush, which is a huge mark against his presidency, I'm sorry to say, because what that basically said is that policies at companies or organizations that weren't overtly racist, they didn't say, no Irish need apply or something like that, but they had a disparate impact, meaning if you had a test and you were testing people if they'd be a good fireman or not, If you could show that the impact of this happened to be that one race did better than another, although this was almost never enforced when the shoe was on the other foot and it was, against whites or men, that was enough to say that the policy itself was discriminatory, even if there was clearly no racial animus or intent behind it. This is an insane policy because what this suggests is that all groups are the same in all ways. That's never been true, whether you believe in race as a genetic distinction or you believe it's all cultural difference. In any case, there are differences between groups. It's not a reason to discriminate against people or be mean to people, but it is just a reality of the world we live in. And so almost any policy has some sort of disparate impact, either on different people from different cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, either sex or gender. Obviously, a requirement that somebody be able to lift a certain amount is going to have a disparate impact when you're hiring firemen between men and women. And so this has been weaponized against basically any kinds of standards. And this is one I talked about. I'm so glad you brought this up because this is one of those factors of wokeness that leads to a lowering of the quality of goods and services that companies provide. Because instead of being able to test employees and track employees' performance to make sure that they're providing the best goods and services they can, they're afraid to do that because of this disparate impact regime.
Yeah, we can't touch this person even though they're doing a bad job because, well, insert whatever the grievance is, that kind of, whatever the grievance group is that they belong to. Fair enough. Is that really what we've been dealing with here? I brought up it's funny that you brought up the thing about the firefighters, because I was mentioning that in the show a little bit earlier about that's exactly the example I used. All they had to show was that one group didn't do the test as well as another group, and then the test got thrown out. And so you have lower qualified people coming in there. And no, we're not all the same. And I was picking on Somalia this week only because it's been in the news a lot in Minnesota and all these other things. The average IQ of a Somalian is generally 86. And then it's not that way coming from China or Norway or anything else. There are different abilities from different groups around the world. It's just a fact of life. And I guess the Democratic Party is a bit about trying to ignore that or just eliminate that realization here, Will. Is that what's going on, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that. To tell you the truth, I actually think it's just a casus belli, a reason for being for them, because it allows – because there are differences between groups, you will always need the Democratic Party to intervene on behalf of your group in order to make sure the equal outcome. So it's a reason for them to keep their patronage machine going, which is their real reason for existing, right? They want to stay in power. And so there's a term that gets thrown around online called gay race communism. And what that means by that isn't that people are gay that engage in it. It's that by splitting people into different identities and then saying that the outcomes for all of these identities need to be exactly equal, you basically give yourself a route to communism, meaning you have a reason for the government to intervene in all situations, because there's always going to be equal outcomes between people of different abilities and backgrounds. It's not to say anything negative about anybody. It's just that there's going to be unequalness in society. But if you have this idea that any disparate outcomes between any kind of groups necessitates government intervention, you will always have a reason for more and more government. And that's where the communism comes in. You've got a basically infinite excuse to conduct interventions into private life and society. And so you're exactly right. You're getting to the core. This disparate impact thing really gets to the core of the whole woke ideology. And
the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is all in, unfortunately, even right now.
And that's exactly right. And this is a sort of the political science technical term for this is corporatism, where you have the corporations allying with the state to basically become an arm of the state. We saw this in Nazi Germany. We've seen this in pretty much every fascists were known for it. I'm not saying this is fascist. I'm just saying that's a hallmark of that ideology. And you see that's what the chamber is doing. Even in violation of federal and state civil rights law, employment law, they're putting it on their webpage. They're putting up videos about it because they have decided to align themselves with the Democratic Party and the progressive movement. And people just need to know that. They need to know what the chamber is and what it stands for. And that's the big reason we put out this woke alert.
Will Hild, Executive Director of Consumers Research, and once again, your website, and I signed up for the woke alerts, and so I get this, and we'll link to, everything about this, including this new report of yours, but where do you go to sign up?
Absolutely. People can visit us at consumersresearch.org, consumersresearch.org, and they can sign up for those woke alerts. And I think you'll attest, we don't bombard you, we don't spam you. This isn't like you get hit up every day.
No.
We wait for big moves, things that you as a consumer need to know about. And we also don't just want to rile you up and make you angry or feel bad about the fate of the world, we give you actionable things you could do to push back. We give you contact information. And I will tell you, I know this interview and a lot of the stuff I come on here, it makes it seem like, oh, wow, the world's really not doing well. I don't know if I just want to turn this off. But I don't want to leave anyone with a sense that they're not empowered. Consumers have shaken the foundations of this woke nonsense over the last 4 or 5 years by pushing back with Budweiser and Target and a whole host of other companies. So you as a consumer, you the listener, you should absolutely feel empowered by that. And if you'd like to join up and keep pushing back on these people, please join us at consumersresearch.org and sign up for our woke alerts.
Because the point is that they then give you the people to contact to tell them what you think about it, to use your consumer power for good, and just to get an even playing field out there. Is that a good way of looking at it to wrap up?
That's exactly right. And as I noted earlier in the interview, a lot of the superstructures from Wall Street, the asset managers, the banks, that were pushing a bunch of wokeness and convincing these companies to poke their own customers in the eye, because of federal and state action, they're starting to fall apart. So consumers have never had more power over the last 10 years than they do right now. So your calls mean more today than they did yesterday, and they're going to mean even more tomorrow. So I encourage people to get involved.
Appreciate the help, Will. Great talking with you. Thanks for being on the show. Be well.
Thanks so much.